Okay, people. So today, thanks to the great AJ Feuerman, I am joined by Lauren Loesberg. Loesberg?
It's pronounced Loesberg, but
Oh,
yes. I'm not Dutch, but a lot of people think I'm Dutch, and that is how the Dutch say it. So
okay.
you you are not incorrect.
I will take that.
Mhm.
No, Lauren, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this, especially after watching your new film, your feature directorial debut, year one. Yo. Now, AJ always sends me a good film. So when she hits me up, I know I'm expecting something like something with meat on the bones, something that's really gonna get me thinking. And man, year one was so interesting. So interesting, but traumatic at the same time. God damn it, woman. What are you trying to do to me?
I'm glad it achieved its intended purpose.
Like one of the big things I liked about it, and it's one of the things I like about a lot of like the movies I like, it's the reality of it, right? It feels real. It feels like real conversations, real situations, and not those things that are resolved in that Hollywood way, you know? So, really, because what kind of led to this? What was the impetus for you
Yeah.
making this film?
Yeah. Um, Absolutely. So I've known I wanted to be a filmmaker for a really long time. So I always was making movies and I went to school for film. And my freshman year of college um was really, really difficult. I went through a lot of very difficult experiences and it was a very dark time in my life. I was eventually diagnosed with depression and I struggled with my mental health a lot. And I basically there was just I remember it so vividly. I was walking on campus and it just suddenly hit me that I could turn this into a movie that time. And that was right when I was like literally in the deep end of it. And that was the first time in like months and months and months that I had felt like I'd seen a light at the end of the tunnel of this very difficult time that I was going through. So so that was the idea of like potentially making this a movie of this thing that I was experiencing was like truly the thing that kept me going for like almost a year after that. Like it was like my lifeline literally.
Mm.
Um and so yeah, so I wrote it over the course of several years. Like I wrote it and then I put it away and then I came back to it and was like, this is garbage and I need to do it again and over it. And then I would show it to someone and they'd be like, what are you talking about? And so on and off, or then I would put it away for 6 months and then I would come back to it kind of thing. But I knew that I wanted to make it. I wrote it very much with the intention of making it pretty shortly after college because I knew I always knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew I wanted to make movies. And I also knew that I didn't want to wait around for 10 years for someone to give me my chance to make something. I was going to make it.
Mm.
I wanted to make movies and I was going to do it, and do it myself. I mean, if someone came down, angel from heaven came down and gave me, here's $1 million and you can go make a movie. Awesome. But like, I also wasn't going to wait around for that to happen. Um, and yeah, then COVID hit, but it was a really good time to be in pre-production, aside for the fact that you had to figure out COVID restrictions and things like that. But that was a really good time to get planning. And yeah, and then we can talk a lot more about the production of stuff, but that was kind of the story of like how this project came to be.
Right, right. Now, because it's kind of similar to your experience, was there ever the thought of maybe I need a bit more time Like, is this gonna, you know what I mean, bring back those raw emotions? Is this gonna really, mess with my mood at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually think that making the movie gave me the closure I needed and was the processing that I needed to move on from that. Um, and like I didn't really get closure from college because
Mm,
I graduated in 2020. So, all that closure of like finally having graduation or like your senior week where you do all this stuff. Like I didn't get that. So I had a very weird I felt like the first 2 years out of college, I still hadn't like said goodbye to it. And then coming back to campus and making this movie, that was my real like me finally processing it and being able to understand the experience that I went through and then be able to move on from there. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see how it brought me back in some ways, but I was able to look at it so differently. Like, I definitely felt like I was looking at the experience objectively, like out of body rather than being
yeah,
so deeply in it at the time.
right. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't know, how closely was your experience to Rubies?
Yeah, I would say a lot of things were inspired by things that happened to me, but then obviously, fictionalized and put in context. And then
Yeah.
like there was a lot of it that was, okay, what's going to work better story wise and movie wise, and change things around. And also, Elizabeth Yu, who plays Ruby, I think she's incredible, and she brought her very much her own personality and spin on the character. So I would say a lot of the things that she goes through are very similar to things that happened to me, but Ruby as a character and as a person is very, very different.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Because, I mean, I thought it was interesting the way you use the ocean,
Mm,
as that kind of analogy of, being overwhelmed,
yeah.
being like, also because, when you look at the sea, you think, oh, that looks very pleasant, but underneath the currents and everything like that. So, and I think that's very similar to kind of depression, where someone might look at you and think you're fine, but internally you're just this mess, And
Yeah.
so it's just like we've got these ocean scenes at night, and it's just, oh man, you just hear the waves, but you can't necessarily see everything again, which is very symbolic to that. But then we get that point where we have the ocean, but now it's during the day
Hmm.
and it is calmer, and I thought that was a really kind of nice visual way of kind of showing this struggle, like, what I mean, showing this fight to kind of survive, this period of her life. Like,
Yeah.
what was the kind of feeling about using that as that visual cue? Was there anything else that you thought might work, but you know, you then just thought, nah, let's go with the ocean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the thing about the movie that is most um unique to me and like specific to my experience was that I went to Northwestern, which is in Chicago, and we shot the film at Northwestern. We weren't going to originally. We looked at quite a few different universities, but I really wanted to shoot it at the school that I had went to because I
Mm,
that was just really emotional for me, and that was what I like. It was going to feel so weird and so foreign if it was somewhere else, and I really felt like I needed it to be set at the place where my experience was. So Northwestern is on Lake Michigan, and that is where all the water is, which is Lake Michigan. So all of those scenes is on the Northwestern campus. So I would be
ah,
walking to class and looking at the water, and I felt like that was just such a visual motif of my entire experience because this is like this water in this lake is where I was. And it's really interesting because someone recently who is an alumni of Northwestern, who is maybe like 20 years older than me or something, who watched the film, she said the same thing, that she would have dreams of drowning in Lake Michigan while she was at college, and like
Mhm.
remembered that so vividly. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, so that's where that came from. And there, yeah, to answer your question, there weren't really any alternatives because I think like that water and that visual was so clear to me and so related to my experience. So yeah, that was sort of the where that came from.
Okay. And how like easy was it kind of getting the light, the tone right for those different kind of viewpoints of that water?
Of the water
Mm.
specifically? Yeah, I mean, truly so much because it's a low budget indie movie. Truly so many of the reasons we made specific decisions was because it was like we have a finite amount of time and money, and how are we going to get everything that we need to get? So we had a finite window of when to shoot things, and we shot as much as we possibly could. And then myself and my editor Tricia, who is incredible, we spent a lot of time in the edit, like really working through a lot, and we talked a lot about like where the water scene. So I had it all written in the script, but then we deconstructed and put back together a lot in the edit. And we really talked about a lot of like where the water scenes should go, specifically what we should see in each thing, because how does it reflect her where she is at the point in her arc
Yeah.
in the story, and how does that reflect that, and like exactly like in between which scenes of where it should go and why. And like we had to be able to justify every single time we put it in there, because if we couldn't justify why we were adding it in a specific point, then it didn't go in.
Mm. Yeah, there's something like that. If you use it too much, it just takes away the significance. It takes away the power of those scenes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that the other thing I thought was really interesting was the other iteration of Ruby,
Mhm.
because it's like when we see her, she does seem to have this kind of glow about her.
Mhm.
But then at the end, right, when Ruby is doing the reading,
Mhm.
I love the way like you have it because we're kind of looking up at her and her head's like tilted to the side, and we see this kind of glow. It's like she's got this halo around her
Mhm.
head, and so it's just kind of like now the real Ruby has the glow.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my god, I love that you explained it so incredibly, sort of that. Yeah. I mean, that all of that lighting, visual motif stuff is, courtesy of our cinematographer, Jana McLain. Like she was the one who came up with that. Also like lighting. So we called the other Ruby, we called her Ruby too, but like lighting her differently every time we shot her, and then also like coming up with that shot with the backlighting on her in that scene, like all Jaina coming up with that idea, and it worked out so well. It was so incredible.
Yeah, I really liked it because it was kind of like it's you know Ruby's kind of found found a path back to herself.
Yes,
And that
exactly.
kind of that and the light seemed very because it wasn't, you know, like everything is sorted, everything is fixed, but it's just like, no, that I've seen where I need to go now. And I
Yes.
thought like, doing the play, having that confidence, that was the start of it all. So it's just kind of like taking that light, and then we see, you know, Ruby too. And it's not that she's diminished, but she isn't glowing like she did earlier on. So it
Mhm.
was that kind of juxtaposition. And it I thought is such a great way to kind of close the door on things.
Thank you.
Yeah, like what if Jenna kind of came up with the lighting and everything, what was your kind of thoughts on the ending? of
Yeah.
being able to kind of show this transformation that Ruby has now, like, come upon.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking that because I've had a lot of conversations with people about the ending of the film. Because so like we really wanted obviously like mental health and depression and dealing with things like it's not linear. It's not like you just suddenly get better and then everything's fine. Like it's ups, you have downs, you have to work on it. And it also takes a lot longer. I mean, I call this film year one. It's about freshman year of college, but in
Mm,
reality, it's like it's not wrapped up by the end of the year. Like you
no.
continue all these things and issues that you're going through are continuing to go on. Myself, like it was much longer than freshman year, but freshman year was really sort of the poetic arc that I wanted to work with. And very much about the ending is like I really wanted to show that it's like you can put yourself on a path to get better, but it's not one magical thing that's all like all of a sudden, you started going to therapy or you finally got something after getting rejected a bajillion times. And like that's not going to fix everything. That's not going to
Mm,
be make everything better, but I just really wanted to show that you can start to get better. And
yes.
that was really what I wanted to show at the end of the film. And yeah, I mean, we've definitely had a lot of conversations about it because I definitely don't want to make it look like you can just put a band-aid on this thing and everything's going to be fine. Like it's continuing to be a journey. Like the characters of Ruby and everyone else are going to go on to have incredibly eventful sophomore, junior, senior years and lives beyond it, but we're just looking at this one moment
Mm,
in time.
yeah. No, I think that definitely comes through. Like you never, for me, it's not watching and thinking, oh, she's fixed now,
Mhm.
but it was that she's taken these steps, these very
Yes.
vital steps to, turn things around for her,
Mhm.
and I like the conversation that she had with, oh my God, Becca.
Mhm.
Because it was just the whole, what I mean? Like I was blaming myself, but nah, like the only thing I'm guilty of is looking after me.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really important to kind of say, to have that moment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think like people run into this at every age where it's almost glorifying that you're not taking care of yourself and that you of course, there are instances where you want to put yourself first, but like you can't be helpful to anyone or a good friend to anyone if you're not taking care of yourself and you have to protect your own peace and you have to your own I would love to it sounds I talk a lot about the word selfish in this film, but like and it sounds selfish, but like you come first, your health and your life comes first because you are
Mm,
you know? And you can't help others, you can't be a good friend, you can't do anything if you're not in that place. Um, and that took me a really long time to learn, and that's a lot of what I went through, and that was a really important piece of the movie for me.
yeah, I mean, it's like in those safety videos on airplanes, right? Like,
Yes,
hey,
exactly like that.
yeah, you got to put your mask on first before you can help anyone else,
Exactly,
you know?
exactly.
And but I think it's one of those weird things though, because as a kid, you're not taught look after you. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
always be a good friend, help those around you. You know what I mean? Like you're meant to be supporting people and that kind of thing, but it's not. I don't think you're necessarily taught to look out for parasites
Yeah, that's
because
actually so interesting. I've never really thought about that, but you're right. But I mean, like growing up your whole life in school, you're always taught to, be nice to others and what can you do for others. And of course, all that stuff is important. Like, I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression that I'm knocking those things, but you're really not taught about taking care of yourself and looking over to your own mental health and your own well-being, and that that doesn't mean tear people down, other people down, but you have to take care of yourself, and no one is really you aren't taught that growing up, and that is something you have to learn. And it's something also I think a lot of people don't learn.
Oh,
And
for sure.
yeah.
Well, I think because I feel it was interesting the way you show Selena,
Mhm.
because it's that kind of weird thing because she's not necessarily an evil person,
Mhm.
but she is that person who I feel amplifies her feelings.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah, we
mean?
talked she's an incredibly complex character. We talked a lot about her because we did not want her like, she's not an antagonist, she's not a villain. But what happens is that it's two people who are going through very separate and very different mental health crises, and it starts affecting each other.
Yeah.
And that was what we really wanted to get at with that.
Yeah. But I think the problem is you have that one person who is just like kind of like my stuff is the most important stuff,
Mhm.
and you kind of need to tiptoe around me. Like
Mhm.
everything you do is, impacting me.
Mhm.
And I think that was the big thing there. And so it was interesting
Mhm.
watching that, but then seeing how it was impacting Ruby, and she's
Yeah.
taking it on herself, right? And I think that's one of those things that, you are kind of taught to do,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Instead of looking after you, it's taught to be like, I'm sorry I'm making you feel like this, and what can I do? And I can't move out, and I can't do this, and I can't. And it's just like, sometimes you need to step away,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, how difficult was it, like, crafting those interactions to make sure that, it wasn't completely one-sided?
Yeah. I mean, it was definitely a challenge, especially because like Ruby is the character that we are following, and the majority of the film is from her perspective. So it's hard to be objective in the situation between two people when the story is being told from one side.
Mm,
Um, but I mean, I had gone through multiple drafts of the script, and then when we eventually started to go into pre-production, I brought on producers, and my producers were really great about we talked a lot about insert certain things, and they were really good about pointing out like specific scenes or specific lines, like even in the edit too after we shot. They were really great because like the number one thing we wanted to do is we didn't want to villainize Celine,
yeah.
and we wanted to be very, just not even like no one's in the right or the wrong, but it's a crazy situation when you live in like a, you know, not even a 10-foot by 10-foot shoebox with another person, and you're both away from home for the first time and you don't know this person.
Mm,
And if you're both going through something, like of course it's going to get in each other's way. But my producers were really great about like honing in on specific lines and maybe like, let's phrase this differently, or like, is this saying what you really want to say, or is it coming across in a different way? And then also like Emma and Lizzie, who played Ruby and Celine, they brought a lot to the characters themselves, and there were a lot of things that they said or did that weren't exactly what was in the script, but I think really they got along really well, and I think like in the scenes where they acted together they really brought a lot out of each other, and so much just really came from working with them too.
ah, interesting. Now, one thing that was kind of, I think, telling was the fact that Celine's just like, she didn't have a group of female friends.
Hmm.
And so she was looking, hoping to get that at uni.
Hmm.
And I think that is definitely a big part of the situation for her is it's like not used to dealing with that, right? To
Yeah.
interacting in that way. So it's kind of like when you're getting people to look at this and critique it, do you have to be very conscious about the fact that, there's people that probably, went through school like Celine, and then there's
Mhm.
people that went through school like Ruby. So
Mhm.
it's just like whichever you know, had that experience of, you're
Mhm.
probably going to read the script in a different way. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like one person might be like, Lauren, I mean, I'm not really feeling this because of this, but it's more because their experience was different, right? And so that
Mhm.
kind of jarring to them in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely possible. Obviously, you can't control how anyone, reacts to the work that you put out there, but that hasn't really been the response that I've gotten so far. I mean, we've only had a couple screenings so far, but that hasn't it's really been more the majority of the response hasn't really been about like Ruby or Celine specifically, but more just about the feelings of isolation and
Mm,
anxiety and stress and pressure in a collegiate environment and the self pressure to feel like you need to be doing living life a certain way and doing all these things and actually not feeling good inside, which I think both Celine and Ruby do feel. But it's really been more about like the feelings of anxiety and stress and trying to find your place in this community that people have really related to. And I think that N I think, like, a lot of it's you can take that away from both characters because I think the difference between them is that they're both feeling those things, but they are expressing them differently, and
yes.
therein lies the difference between them.
Yeah. It's definitely, internalization of an issue, right? And then
Mhm.
the way that you deal with it, where someone else will deal with it in completely. So it just, you're butting heads on
Yeah.
those different things, which is just, can be a big issue.
Yeah, and definitely something there, like, the thing that I really wanted but, like, their relationship is a huge part of the movie, but the thing that I really wanted to get at was how intimate a relationship between 2 people sharing a room is, or even I mean, like, I've had a roommate for the last, 8 years, but only sharing a room once, but then, living in an apartment, but, like, you don't really see that explored that much in the media. Like, you see a lot of, romantic relationships, but it's
Mm,
like living in a room with someone is so intimate. Like, you
yeah.
know everything about them, they know everything about you. You don't have anywhere that you can hide. And that was sort of what I really wanted to show about their relationship.
Mm, mm. Now, I thought the visualization of the dorm room was
Mhm.
interesting. Like, was it, did you construct it like that with the beds coming at the angle? Was it like that for, you know, an on-screen look, or was that kind of similar to an experience that you'd had?
Yeah, I'd never lived in that kind of setup. But the location we had, um, there were a lot of like slanted walls and things like that, so that we were kind of well, we could have had options. We could have done it a couple different ways, but I think that that was really the only option having their heads like this that we considered was because we wanted to be able to get them in the same shot.
Mm,
And have it be visually looking the way we want and really, we really want to talk about that divide between like her side and seeing that visually, but we also wanted to be able to see them together in the same room at the same time and sort of with the space that we had, like having their heads like that was the best way to do that.
yeah, because I thought visually it was very striking
Mhm.
because you were able to see those differences so clearly. But
Mhm.
yeah, I just wondered. I was just like, was this like a visual thing, or was this kind of like, this was how, your room was back in the day, and you're just like, let me do it like this?
Yeah. Yeah, it was mostly visual and story, but I mean, like we were on like a hall of dorms, and like the majority of them were like that, which is I've never lived like that, but that is so close. I mean, like maybe for the first 3 months you're like okay, but then like someone talks in their sleep or snores or
Oh my
you
gosh,
know,
yeah.
like who knows?
Yeah, you definitely, you feel the best look is the bed to either side of the room, right?
hmm
Because being that close, it's just, yeah, you're so in each other's personal space.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But I mean, I remember in college, like different dorms had like different setups, or even because the shape of the room was different for every
Mm.
single one. Like some people had bunk beds. Like, you're a full grown human being and like you're too old to be sleeping in a bunk bed. But like, so if someone comes home late and comes home and climbs into bed and you're shaking the whole thing, like it like you don't really until you really examine the situation, like how weird is it to be like a fully grown human being sharing a room with someone platonically? Like
Yeah.
it's so strange, but I think we're so expected to act like it's normal and just pretend like all of these things aren't bothering us, but they are, and of course they are.
Mm. Well, yeah, because the only way it would work would be if, you kind of move in the room, but it's all very fluid for the first month until
Mhm.
you kind of understand each other's patterns a bit more. And then you go, okay, right? I'm always in bed first. So I'll take the top bunk and you can have the bottom one because you're in late and that way you're not going to disturb me. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
you can then break it down like that. But yeah, people don't work like that because it's just like,
People
no, I want that side of the room and I want this and I want that because I'm used
yeah.
to that. And it's not like, well, yeah, I snore and that will and I don't want to interfere with you. It's just kind of like you don't think about those issues.
You totally don't think about those issues, and even, like, it you have to be so self-aware and so, willing to accommodate other people, but also being advocating for your needs, and when you're 18 years old, you don't know how to do those things, and
No.
you don't know how to communicate, and also chances are you don't know the person that you're living with, so, like, you're not gonna open up and you're not gonna be like, "Hey, I have issues sleeping and I'm blah 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 blah." Like you're probably not going to communicate that way, or you haven't learned how to communicate that way. But also at
Mm,
the same time, I'm not saying for people not to have roommates. I also think living by yourself would have been a very lonely experience. But I think the important thing is that you have to strike a balance about being communicative and being accommodating for the other person, but also advocating for yourself. And that's a really hard thing to learn when you're 18 years old and you're
yeah.
moving into a bedroom with a person that you don't know.
Well, again, it's one of those things, right? Because you're not taught that.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You're not taught that. And they could make this situation so much easier. Right, because
Mhm.
if you think about it, if everyone filled in, an anonymous questionnaire, right, and there was just things like, are you a night owl? Are you a morning person? Right? Do you hit the snooze button a lot? Right? Like,
Mhm.
do you snore? Do you just these kind of things? And then they can look at all of those answers and then put you in a room with someone that's kind of similar to those things.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
think
not
I
to
think
say
they do that, but it also like, a survey, like first of all, you have to like trust the people who are doing that and that they're going to spend a lot of time doing that for like several thousand kids. And second of all, like there's never going to be a way to get into like the deeper things of like sometimes that's really important.
mm,
Um that's more than that. Like how do you deal with, adversity, or how do you if something difficult happens, like, are you gonna be the one are you going to work together to solve it, or are you going to, you know, leave it to the other person? Or I don't know. There's a lot of like deeper things that a survey could never get at. And I don't know what the fix is here. Like, I wish there was a way that I could be like, if we implement this one thing, we're going to solve freshman year roommates for every single person ever. And like, the reality of the situation is, you know, freshman year of college is an experience that a lot of people are going to go through. And whether it's one thing or another, something is going to be difficult for you. Whether it's you, like, it might be academics. Like, I did not struggle academically in college at all. Like, that was one thing that I just like didn't worry about. But a lot of the things I struggled with were emotional and social. And
Mm.
I had a really, and it's going to be something. You might be best friends with your roommate, but you might have a really difficult time. Like, you might get into a relationship that's not good, or you might, you know, have form some other friendship that is not healthy for you. um and it's about learning the important skills to grow in that time. And I think what I really want to say with this movie is that those things are going to happen to you, but you, you got to protect yourself, and you have to take care of yourself, and you have to prioritize your mental health so that you're able to extract yourself from a situation that isn't healthy for you.
Oh, for sure. But it's kind of that thing is it's too late kind of to teach those things at that point.
Yeah.
Right. Because when you think about all the things, all the lessons that you have at school, why isn't there communication?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? That like you should be taught communication from the moment you go to school.
Yeah.
Right? How to interact with people, how to talk about feelings, how to, you know, resolve issues, just that kind of thing. And it's not going to be perfect. But if you have this lesson, you know what I mean, like 2 times a week, once a week, whatever, whatever, but every week, there's going to be things that permeate, right? There's going to be
Hmm.
things that, you know, you're going to remember, and it will help you navigate to some degree. You know, it's never going to be
Yeah.
perfect, but it would at least be, you know, because you're taught like religious education and just these other things where you're just like, I mean, it's, you know, nice and all, but if we knew how to communicate, you wouldn't have to have some of these other things later on.
Yeah.
You know what I
No,
mean?
yeah. Yeah. I've never really thought about that, but I mean, it is a really good point. Like, I'm trying to think if I ever had that in my life. I think a lot of times, and especially, you know, I think it's changed with the next generation with things like social media. So I think a lot about how you're never taught to, you're always taught to present this facade of like, oh, I'm never sad, everything's great.
Yeah.
I'm super strong, I'm achieving all these great things, and the things, and it's seen as a sign of weakness to admit that you didn't do something well, or that something is bad, or that you're not feeling good about something. And that's definitely something I was feeling. I felt an immense amount of pressure that I couldn't let anyone know how deeply unhappy I was. And that was going to be a sign of weakness, and that was going to just like destroy me. So I had to pretend that everything was great and that I was, you know, doing great.
Mm,
Um, and maybe if we did, like, you know, teach people from a young age that you can admit when something is wrong, and that you can admit that you can be honest that everything isn't great. But I don't know. I feel like social media is just making that worse. You know, there's definitely like, I'm going to share all the great things that are happening in my life, and you're never going to know anything that's, you know, that's not good.
mm. But it's I feel it's like teaching people that aspect of things as well, right?
Yeah.
Don't believe everything you see on social media, right?
Yes.
Don't
Huge.
don't you know what I mean? Because it's just like sometimes it's like people will say something to get certain responses, like, "Oh, you're so brave. Oh,
Yeah.
you're incredible," and it's just like, oh, what are we doing here? This is so weird. And I think
Yeah.
if you're just taught to try and navigate it a little
Yeah.
bit better, it would make it would probably help a lot.
Yeah. I think the world would be a significantly better place if we were all taught to communicate well.
Yeah, it would definitely and it'll resolve certain things. It would still be a crazy ass world, but
Yes.
you know,
Yes. But it would definitely help for sure.
yeah.
I can think of some people who could learn some communication skills.
Indeed, for sure. I did. There's one thing I liked about the film is usually when you have text messages and things like that, it's so small on the screen,
Mm,
and yours were larger than you usually see. And I think
mhm.
someone that's got bad eyesight, it was very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, so much of that came like a couple of reasons. Like one, I hate looking at phones on screens. Like a shot of a
Mm,
phone is like the ugliest shot. But it's such an integral part of our society now, and so to not have that would feel dishonest. Um, but I also wanted the social media to feel very integrated with the story because it's such a part of our lives, and it was such a huge part of my life when I was in college about like I was feeling terrible and I wasn't making a ton of friends, and then I was seeing on social media that all these people were having the best time and making all these friends. And I wanted that to feel very integrated with the story because it really is, especially in just today's day and age, like
yeah.
how integrated with our daily lives that is and how much we take away beliefs about other people and beliefs about ourselves based on that. Um and then yeah, so that was mostly where that came from. I've seen it a lot like on the screen in recent years, but the first time that I ever saw that was in this movie called Men, Women and Children, which is a film that I love, and it really struck me just about like how it's a bunch of different interacting stories about families with kids in high school and how just like social media is affecting their lives
Mm.
basically. Um, and so yeah, so that was sort of like what inspired that and where that came from.
Uh-huh. I mean, coming into this film, it being, your first feature, how many, like, how much stuff did you have to try and learn on the fly, right? Like,
Hmm.
you've written your script, but did you fully comprehend, like, just everything that was going to go into creating this visual story?
Yeah, I think for the most part, there were definitely some things where I was like, "Oh, damn, like I should have thought a lot more about this like one specific thing than I did not like this prop was going to be way more difficult to get than I thought it was and I didn't think about it till the day before." But I think for I'd made a lot of student films, a lot of short films, and so I went into this thinking of it as just like a big long student film. Like that was very much the energy that I wanted it to have. I wanted it to look good, but we were doing it on a very small budget.
Mm,
I'm pretty young and I definitely wanted to be sort of like honest to the crew and to the cast about like what this was. And so I sort of that was sort of how I went all about it. But I think the things that I didn't anticipate were the stuff that doesn't really come with a short film. So things like once the film is made, like distribution, sales, marketing, like
yeah.
publicity, like all of I mean, I knew about that stuff in theory, but I totally underestimated like how much work that was going to be and sort of like how to go about all of that stuff and how important it is to find people who really know what they're doing to help you with those things. So I think that was all the stuff that I was like, "Ooh, am I a little bit in over my head?" Like the movie itself was so clear to me and I had such a vision on it and I had a lot of incredible collaborators who helped bring that vision to life, but definitely the business side of it has been a huge learning experience.
Ah, yes. Well, I mean, at least you found AJ because,
Yes.
definitely one of the best doing it.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect example of like I don't know what I'm doing with publicity. So I'm going to find someone who does. and who is great at it. So that was a huge blessing.
Oh yeah. Like with the, I think like the visuals of this, right? So you've got Ruby 1 and Ruby 2,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and those different looks. How easy was it to kind of, you know, pinpoint those type of things?
Yeah, I think when you say looks, you mean like in terms of like their styling?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the styling of the character, I mostly left it up to Lizzie and then our, costume and hair and makeup team about what they really wanted. We decided early on, well, we knew that Ruby 2 was going like the word that I always used was glamorous. Like her hair is perfect in every scene. And then we also talked about we decided she needs to wear the same outfit because we need to show that she's not real and she's an apparition. And if she's
Mm,
changing her clothes, we just thought that would be too confusing. Um, but aside from it, I really left it up to Lizzie. I gave her a lot of leeway about, what she wanted to do. Well, not necessarily gave her a lot of leeway, but I really wanted her to be able to build out the character and make it her own and bring herself into that character, which I think that she did. So that was really where a lot of that came from. I mean, like there wasn't too much direction with the styling aside from, it has to make sense for the scene and the time and um fit into a very, very small budget. So again, so many of the creative decisions were just like, can we physically do it? How can we physically do it?
mm. But where did the notion come from to kind of let the, you know, the actors kind of, you know, bring their essence into it?
Um, I mean, like, can only speak for myself as a director is like you can only micromanage so much on one set, you know? So like I mean I needed them. I needed them to bring their own essence to it because I didn't have the bandwidth or the ability to do it for them or to tell them exactly what they should do in any specific way. And I think it makes it, a film is a collaboration. So you definitely, which is, something I have to learn as well because it's my baby and like so much of it is so personal, but also letting people take it and run with it and bring their own ideas to it. And it makes it so much better because it's, like having all of these people like contribute their best ideas and their best skills to something is so much better than me doing all of it. Like I can think of like so many instances, even like I thought this one thing needed to be like a close up and we shot it on the close up. And then Jana was like, let's do it on this lens. I think it should be on this lens. And I was like, okay, fine. Like we'll do one take. And then we did it. And I was like, you were so right. My shot looked bad. Your shot looked good. Like, you know,
Yeah.
but I mean, in terms of the characters, like I needed that. I feel like I had the outline and the skeleton of who they were, but I really needed them to bring their own ideas and selves to it.
So did any of that come from, because you know you've acted in things yourself,
Mhm.
so from your experiences on sets?
Yeah. I I'm not like I had so much imposter syndrome about like acting because I took some acting classes in college, but I wasn't an acting major and Northwestern had a very, very highly rated very intense theater program. So I always had like a ton of imposter syndrome about it and always felt like, "Oh, I have no idea what I'm doing and all these people have all this training that I don't have." Um so yeah, I think that was almost part of it too, because I knew that like Emma and Lizzie are both very highly skilled actors. And there was almost instance like I knew so much about the story and I knew a lot about the important things about the characters, but they know way more about acting than I know. And so I would help coach them and be like, okay, well, in this scenario, she's feeling this, or like Ruby is not quite yet at rock bottom, but she's like, 40% of the way there and then she's 60% of the way here. Or I could say like let's make this performance more extroverted or let's reel it back a little bit and I could sort of coach them and help them with the
Mm,
story, but like in terms of like how to build a character or how to convey an emotion or something. Like they know so much more about that than I do. So I feel like they taught me a lot too as a director.
Which is always a good thing.
Yeah, it was a great thing. I mean, I think I learned so much from working with them. I think I even like looking back on it now, I was like, wow, in this particular instance, or it was like I had no idea what I was doing, but I now know that next time I'm going to be able to communicate this thing, this thought in this kind of language that I now have that I didn't have before.
Mm, mm. Yeah, like when you were attempting to do that, like what were kind of your reference points? Did you kind of use music,
Mm,
films, books, you know what I mean? Like be like, oh, in this scene, she's kind of like you know, the character from blah blah blah, or what did you kind of how did you approach it?
yeah. I think most of my references were visual. So, I mean, but it was more for like the visuals of how the film's going to look and the production design and the lighting and that kind of thing. For the actors themselves, I mean, I think we really just had conversations about it. Like we really just talked about it. And I mean, I hope I was very upfront in letting them know that we were going to build the character together. Um and truly, so much of it was I was running around dealing with 5 million things, and it's an indie production, and I have so much on my plate, and that I really needed them to be working on it on their own and then bringing like what they came up with to the set. And it was mostly right. I mean, like they are just both incredibly skilled actors. I think Emma in particular, who plays Celine, like that character is so tricky to nail, and whoever we were going to cast in that role was going to make the movie entirely different. And she brought a lot of
Mm,
her own sensibilities to that. And it was really just sort of working from there with sort of what they brought and then just molding it to fit the story. But I mean, mostly like we just talked about it and just talked about like sort of like this is the experience that we went through, and they're both very, mature young women who are of a similar age to their characters, and I think they could relate to what their characters were going through in very deep ways. And so it wasn't, it wasn't that super far of a reach. Like I wasn't asking them to play like an alien or
yeah.
anything. Um but yeah, it was really just conversations, I think, just talking about the story and sort of like how to get there.
Okay. Well, I mean, it definitely worked, right?
Thank you.
The film itself is great, but also you're getting a lot of acclaim for this.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, how does that feel?
It feels really good. I've been working on this for so long. I mean, it even feels crazy because like we shot it 2.5 years ago. So I feel like it's already been such a long time, and now that people are starting to finally see it, it feels very surreal. I feel like I'm
Mm.
watching myself from afar.
I mean, yeah, you're being talked about as, one to watch.
Ooh, I
But
hope so.
yeah, but like as a filmmaker, how much do you think you've found your voice? Right? At what arc of the curve do you think you're at right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm still finding it. Like even now when I watch the film, so I mean, I just watched it again 2 days ago at Dances with Films, and I'm struck by like how much I've already changed as an artist and as a filmmaker since
Mm,
making that movie. Like, so I'm so glad I made it when I did because I think it really reflects it closer to the experience that I had and how I was feeling in that time. Whereas I think if I had waited, it would have changed so much as I got further and further away and was able to look at it differently. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think I am on an upward trajectory of finding my voice. Like I think that the film very, very much reflects my voice, and that's one of the things I'm most proud of about it. Like, it really is a very deep reflection of me and who I am as a person, but also at the same time, I'm very much still on the journey, and I, want to get funding to keep making more films and keep exploring.
Yeah. Like, do you have ideas of, projects that you would like to get to?
Oh yeah. I've completed 2 other features that I would love to do. I've got a couple of shorts, and I also, I like to do music videos and more experimental things as well. But I mean, like, the things that I'm really working on is, getting funding for shorts, and definitely want to get my next feature in development. Um, but I think that, definitely looking to go a little more of the traditional route moving forward with my next project, rather than like the super low budget indie route.
Yeah. 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 Like, are there any genres that you're kind of hoping to dip your foot into?
Yeah, oh definitely. I have another one of my films that I've written is another coming of age film, which I am really excited about, and I love the project, but I'm also really eager to like try other genres. Like, I wrote a horror film, which is like nothing like I've ever done before, and I think it would be really fun to do that. And I'm a huge period piece fan, and I love
Oh.
historical stuff, and I have a ton of stuff I want to do like in that space.
Is there a particular period in history that you like the most?
I wouldn't say one in particular, but I would say definitely like um 19th century or older. Like, yeah, like more older, like not like World War II era or anything
Yeah.
like that. But beyond that, like pretty much anything. I think I've always been a really big fan of history and like a really avid student of history, and like I love watching historical movies, and that's, you know, always the place I saw myself wanting to go. But that also means a lot bigger budgets.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
one step at a time, maybe a short first, and we'll take it from there.
Like in the film, you're doing you have Ruby doing the Greek play,
Yeah.
and they do have oh gosh, I can't remember if it's called Odysseus or what the name they're calling it, but they're doing that story,
Yeah, it's
but with
Iphigenia.
yeah, but
Mhm.
with I think it's Odysseus as he gets home to Penelope, and I think that's out early next year.
Oh, another film. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, yes, yes. I love that stuff. I mean, that was, yeah, obviously that was a huge, I love Greek, like ancient Greece, and all, just really, really fascinated about all that stuff. Like, I love reading the sort of like historical fiction books about like ancient women in history, and that was a big reason of like why I put that play. I mean, there's a lot of like, allegories and similarities
yeah.
between the stories, but like that was a huge reason, just because it's a source of fascination for me. But yeah, I mean, I love that stuff, and I will be running to see that movie.
Yeah, I'm definitely intrigued because I don't think
Hmm.
we've really like we've done kind of Troy and the war and everything like that, but I don't think we've looked at Odysseus' return home. And I
Yeah.
think it's meant to be this like a psychological thing because Penelope had to do what she had to do to survive,
Hmm.
and I think he's kind of pissed.
Hmm.
And so it's meant to be, yeah, it sounds really interesting. I'm very
Yeah.
curious to
No,
see.
I'm gonna immediately look up, because you're right, it rings a bell, and I'm gonna look up like exactly what the specs of that movie are after this. But
Mm,
yeah, I mean, a huge source of interest. I mean, like truly my dream movie niche would be things about women, like famous women in history, whether they're fictional or not. Um, and sort of like telling the story from their perspective and what their lives look like. Like, that's a dream for sure.
ah, yeah, no, that could be fun. That could be fun.
Mhm.
And with horror, you mentioned that you've written a horror. because there's so
Mhm.
many different types of horror. So
Yeah.
what's the kind that you enjoy? If
Yeah.
enjoy is the word.
I'm not like a horror aficionado by any means. So for me, it's more of like, oh, the premise of the movie is interesting, and then the genre happens to be horror.
Yeah.
And that's not that I'm like scared of horror movies. Like I can go see a horror movie, but I'm not like one of those like I definitely don't know the history of the genre. It's a very very beloved genre and people really know a lot about it, and I'm definitely not one of those. But I think the ones I really enjoy, it's like when it's using when the movie, the premise is interesting and good, and then horror is just the genre in which they tell that story,
Mm.
is like what I think is really fascinating. Like something like Get Out, which I know
Yeah.
people reference all
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean, like that's definitely more the kind of horror than I gravitate to.
Yes, I'm not really a fan of like the torture porn type of
Yeah,
stuff. Like
yeah,
that's
me
not
neither.
really my thing. But I just like a well-crafted story.
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty genre agnostic as a person. Like, if the movie is good and the story is good, like, it doesn't really matter to me what genre it is. I mean, there are definitely ones I gravitate to more, but it's about the story being good.
Yeah, because I would say I'm not necessarily a huge rom-com fan,
Mhm.
but Richard Linklater's Before trilogy are some of
Mhm.
my favorite films. Like,
Mhm.
I love those films. I really enjoyed, um, like, Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind,
Yeah.
like, About Time, there was this British film, gosh, I think it was the year before last. I don't think it was last year. It was called Rye Lane. It is
Mhm.
I think in the States, it's on Hulu, and it is
Okay.
so good. Oh my days, it's so good. But
Mhm.
they're the kind of films like Garden State, like, I
Mhm.
love that kind of,
I can
sort of
totally see a connective tissue between all of those movies that you just named.
yeah.
So there's definitely like a subgenre there.
Yeah, that I think that's the thing. That's what I was saying to you, at the very start before we, started filming that, it's a film that deals with things in a way that feels realistic,
Mhm.
and I think that's the big thing about year one. It's
Mhm.
like these conversations feel real. Like
Mhm.
it's that bit when Ruby's having a conversation with Selena
Mhm.
about, like the panic attacks and everything like that. And it was just like this really weird kind of, well, I'm having this, but and then it's just like, how do I navigate this? But it
Mhm.
wasn't, I think like if it was certain kind of Hollywood films,
Mhm.
it would have played out so differently and
Mhm.
just felt insincere.
Mhm.
It's just like I mean, just you're watching some films and you've got a couple and they're like, we're so in love. Let's try for a baby. And they'll
Mhm.
be like, it's been a week and we're not pregnant yet. Something must be
Mhm.
wrong. And you're just like,
Mhm.
what are you talking about? Like,
Mhm.
But that's
Yeah.
the story, right? And then it's
Mhm.
just like, they're going through all of this, but then it all work, and you're just like, this is not real life.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff always kind of drives me a bit crazy. So I really
Yeah.
enjoy things that are crafted in a way that you can see reality in it. Even if
Yeah.
it is fantasy, right?
Right.
It makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's what draw people to the movies. I mean, like, it doesn't matter what genre you like, but you're looking at relationships between people, and if those relationships feel fake, then the movie's never gonna work, no matter
Yeah.
what it is. Um, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
I don't know if it's out stateside, but there's a new film with Andrew Garfield and Florence
Oh,
Pugh.
is it We Live in Time?
Oh my day, it's so good.
I have not seen it yet because okay, I really want to watch it. I love both of them. I know that writer and he's fantastic. Um, but I haven't been in a mood to be sad yet.
Right, 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 right,
so
right.
but I mean I am dying to watch it and I have it available and I really need to watch it so I can finally talk about it with people. I'm just like, oh my God, I know this is gonna be a gut punch. And sometimes at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't know if that's really what I want right
Yeah.
now.
I mean, I will say this, right? There are definitely moments in that film that you're just like, oh, but there's also like these really just lovely moments,
hmm
like these well-crafted scenes that just make you smile.
hmm
And I think, yeah, it it's not, the same at all, but I feel
hmm
themically it's like about time.
hmm
So if you enjoyed that, because that had
hmm
those sad moments in it,
Yeah,
but at its core, it's kind of joyous. And I think
yeah,
that We Live in Time is very similar to
hmm yeah. I will. I'm gonna try to get to it very soon.
that.
It's just like every time I'm looking for a movie to watch, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to be destroyed right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean because there's films that I've had to put on the back burner because I'm just like, I really
Yeah,
want to watch that, but I think I need something happy at the moment.
yeah. Comes back to exactly what we're saying about protecting your own peace
Yes.
and making your own boundaries. So Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield, I'm not gonna let you destroy me today.
Uh, oh man. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Ah, okay. So oh, before we go, how was Dances with Films? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was not the first time my film has been screened, so I sort of got that like band-aid
Yeah.
ripped off already, but it was I'm from New Jersey originally, so I have a lot of friends and family like in the area, so that was the first screening that a lot of my hometown folk got to go to.
Wow.
So it was like so much of the theater, it was like my parents who had seen the film before, but like my friends from high school, some friends from college, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, multiple of like my parents' friends who I've known for years. Like, so it was a lot of people coming to the screening, like people who'd been very supportive of me and this project for a very long time, finally seeing it for the first time. So I was like, it was there was a little pressure on. I was nervous. But it was like really really special to like to have this particular screening like be my hometown screening and have like all of these people there and seeing it, so it was really great.
Ah, fantastic. Yeah. And like just the general feeling in the room, was it like what you were hoping for?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I so much of this film I made for just myself and like what I wanted to say and get my experience across, and then as you said in the beginning, like, ooh, it's kind of traumatic, like, you know it's very raw and it's maybe not the most feel good movie to like you might not come out of it feeling like rainbows and butterflies, but so definitely there was a lot of pride in sharing it with those people, but I definitely think it was a very raw emotional experience, and some of my a lot of my family members and friends definitely wanted to process it all afterward. And I think there's like a need for a little processing time.
Well, I think the interesting thing about it though is there are things where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that kind of situation. And
Mhm,
oh yeah, I've been there. I've definitely
mhm,
been there. But when you see her like start that journey on the way out, that's very hopeful.
mhm,
So like you know what I mean? You don't leave feeling weighted down.
Mhm.
Like, you do leave feeling hopeful.
Mhm.
And I think that's the great thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because there are those things which you look at and you'll be like, "Oh, yeah, that was tough. That was," but then you're just like, "Oh yeah, no, there was." You do find your way out,
Mhm.
right? It's you're not in the darkness forever, and I
Mhm.
think that's the thing.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly that.
Mm, awesome. Okay, so next film, you have to come back for another conversation. Lauren.
Oh, absolutely. I hope that'll be sooner rather than later. Can't
That would be
guarantee
good.
when, but I promise you. Oop, my tripod's falling out. I promise you I will be back whenever that is.
Tremendous. And will Oscar be coming with you as well?
Yeah, I'm sure he will. He's sitting on a shelf right next to me. He goes everywhere that I go, so he will be here.
Nice. Okay, though. Let everyone know how they can keep track of everything you're doing and the film and all of that jazz.
Yeah, definitely for the film, our main form of communication is Instagram. So we are at Year One Feature on Instagram, and that's where we're posting like all of our screenings, ways you can see it, updates on it, stuff like that. So highly recommend checking that if you are interested in finding a way to watch it. And then yeah, I am also on Instagram. I'm at Laura Lowe's, but I'm also on other forms of social media, and feel free to connect with me.
Boom. So, people, make sure you do that. Definitely go follow because you will want to see the film. It is, we talked about, you know what I mean? Like it can feel a little rough in places, but it is, man, it's so well done. Like the
Thank
film is
you.
just every aspect of the film is done really well. It's just those interact like ah when Ruby goes back home and she's walking down the stairs and then see like one of her mum's friends is there and she goes to turn around and you'd be like, oh god, yeah, I know that. I
Mhm.
know, because you know the questions that are coming, right? And
Mhm.
so it's just full of just those moments that you be like, I remember that. But then, as I
Mhm.
said, it's the journey out of the darkness and
Mhm.
all of that. So it's something that will resonate with people because I think everyone has gone through an aspect of this. Maybe not to
Mhm.
the same degree or anything like that, but yeah, you get it.
Mhm.
You get it. So
Mhm.
people, you definitely want to check out Year One. So follow the page so you can see if it's screening somewhere near you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. This is my first podcast ever, so this was just lovely, and it was really great to get the chance to like talk so in depth about the film. So thank you.
Ah, no worries at all. I'm glad you enjoyed the experience. Yeah, it's all down to AJ, and
Yeah,
she knows what she's doing.
she sure does.
Well, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time,
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I just can't wait for your next film.
Me neither. So thank you.
Awesome. All right, Lauren, you take care, and yeah, people, go check out Lauren Loesberg and check out her film Year One. Thanks, Lauren. You take care.
Thanks.